Today we're going to be diving into AI agents and why this may be the biggest thing to happen in crypto and the blockchain space in a long time. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into TechPath. Today we wanted to get in, I would say, the world's most renowned expert on this area and topic, and that is, of course, Yat Siu coming in from Animoca Brands. How are you, Yat?
Very good. Thank you for having me again. It's been certainly a very interesting start of the year. So
Yeah.
I think
No kidding. No kidding. We have got some crazy stuff going on. I want to jump to a tweet that you put out, and this was interesting. Virtuals Protocol and Animoca Brands now partnering to invest in AI gaming. Explain this. What are you up to? Where do you see this going?
Well, I mean, I think AI, as we know, has been all the talk for really the last 12 to 18 months. But really, the potential in AI and gaming has not yet been fully explored. And as you may recall, we spoke a lot about how gaming and AI will not just revolutionize production. That's where most of the effort has been. Oh, you can make a game cheaper, or you can reduce production costs. And it's very true that with our own studios as well as with our portfolio, in some cases, production sort of elements have been reduced by up to 80%, depending on the topic. So that's obviously efficient. Right. But what we haven't really seen yet is the rise of actually what is more natural, which is that the consumers engaging with AI, not just in terms of creating sort of new worlds and environments, but basically with NPCs. So when you think about the number of people that are interacting and engaging with NPCs today as a form of dumb AI, that's actually more people engaging with it than OpenAI, for instance, right? There's actually billions of people on a daily basis playing games, dealing with some kind of basically quasi AI agent, but the quality of that AI is very low. But there's a couple of reasons why the quality of the AI is very low. The first one is that the cost of running AI is actually still very, very expensive, right? So if you're a game and you have to basically, and I think I tweeted about this, right? I was just sharing that, if you have tens of millions of users and you actually create sort of a full-fledged sort of, traditional LLM on top of it, and then actually what happens is you're going to run it, the cost into the tens of millions of dollars extra, depending on the size of the game, which, that makes it untenable. So that's why the AI is very, very simple. But, with things like DeepSeek, for instance, and some of the innovations around that, where they are able to sort of really sort of reduce the cost of running AI, we're going to see a lot of explosion in those areas where they can create very specialized AI, but also one that will feel basically the same like what you can get from a full-fledged LLM, except for a fraction of the cost in terms of the subject area. And this means that billions of people are going to be onboarded with this engagement of an AI that actually they're already dealing with, but that's just much more smarter and much more intelligent, and frankly feels more, like people today already talk to ChatGPT as if they were their friend, right? That's something that a lot of people are talking about. But can you imagine what that looks like when you're actually dealing with an AI character that you're engaging every day anyway inside a game in which you have an emotional attachment or connection to? I mean, how many people today still remember their childhood gaming characters in which they've actually formed some kind of emotional connection with, because it's not just a text, but actually it's something visual, it's an avatar, but it's within a context and a story that makes sense. So we think that's going to be really revolutionary. And the reason why this is so big for crypto is because, of course, the currency and the mechanism is going to be crypto rails, because AI agents can actually, own and create value, through tokenization, which wasn't really possible before in Web 2. Exactly. Like at the end of the day, you can talk to a fun AI agent, but they can't actually sort of do business with you. But here, they can actually do that. And that gives an AI agent actually power. And today when you look at the investing agents, like all of the DAOs, whether it's like a sort of what used to be AI16Z, ELIZA, or virtuals, or even things like AIMONICA, for instance. What's interesting about those ones is that actually people start working for them, right? Just think about how people used to think of an AI as something that is a tool for me, but actually now people are, whether they understand it or not, are actually kind of working for an AI, because the AI as a protocol can give you tokens and can give you value. And that's actually really fascinating as well.
Well, you mentioned AIMONICA right here. The announcement there is officially joining as a strategic partner there. So to your point, we've started to see a lot of that. I've had several guests on talking about agentic AI and what we're going to see. Talk to me about AIMONICA. What are you trying to do here? I was also following even the portfolio of what's happening here. Explain this a little bit more, would you please?
Yeah, so first, AIMONICA is not a project that we launched, and we really started working with them actually post-launch. And clearly, this was an inspiration of what used to be AI16 sort of Z before they had to rebrand to ELIZA OS because I guess because of some maybe possible requests from Andreessen Horowitz. But the way that we think of AI from our, let's call it more philosophical lens, is that I actually think that this is the next evolution of essentially mashup culture in UGC. How do brands proliferate today? Right? They proliferate very different from where they proliferated 30 years ago, which was, I have an IP right and I basically publish it and I market it and I'm in control of the advertising, I'm in control of the messaging. And really the consumer really had very little control over the brand, right? I mean, they were just really consumers of the brand. They really didn't have any kind of ownership or ability to mash it up. Then came something like YouTube, right? Or now, of course, TikTok and those type of platforms. And what do people do? They mash up culture every single day, right? If you remember when YouTube first came out, they were sort of, creating mashup of trailers of movies and stuff like that, or maybe even existing TV series. And people started watching that more than they were perhaps watching the actual show. And in the beginning, the studio said, hey, this is a threat. We don't like that. We got to stop that, right? And then eventually they all caved and said, you know what? It's actually much better to actually adopt it. And so today, there's no Hollywood movie that can be released without user-generated content on YouTube and on TikTok and so on. So we look at the sort of space very similarly. That is to say, if someone's going to go out and sort of create sort of a clearly an Animoca-inspired IP, right? We have two choices. One is we reject it and we say we don't like that, or we say, you know what? How can we work with you and sort of make something happen there? Because if you believe in UGC and if we believe in this kind of collaborative spirit, which is what Animoca is all about, then wouldn't it be kind of sort of hypocritical for us to say, please shut that down, we don't want you to do anything with it, right?
Yeah.
And if we're right about this, which is that sort of AI is essentially that sort of supercharging tool for a lot more sort of user-generated content that is now created much more organically and maybe automatically and maybe in a much more agentic fashion, then we should basically sort of show the way in terms of how brands should interact with it. And I completely imagine in the future there'll be many, many spin-offs and many sort of brand mashups, and working with them and gaining value and cooperating with it would be probably better. Maybe in another way, if AIMONICA does really, really well, does that look better or worse for Animoca? And we would say, even though it's not related to us, it's going to look better for us. In the same way that if a video from, I don't know, like a Gucci or a Nike or Adidas, not created by them, suddenly has 100 million views on whatever platform out there, is that a good or a bad thing? Most of the time, it's a pretty good thing, unless it's some kind of scandal, right?
Right.
So that's kind of how we view it. There was a Yat AI that came out, right? Basically, sort of emulating myself, and then creating some funny videos and stuff. And again, I can take two approaches. I can say I don't like that because I look weird and this is not my brand, or I can say, you know what, I'm just going to have fun with it. And I think that's really the path forward.
Speaking of how this starts to affect gaming, you were on record talking about the potential of the GTA 6 rollout eventually triggering an AI gaming bull run. So I wanted to play a clip for you. This is Adin Ross, and I want to get your opinion on this. Take a look.
Well, I'm gonna tell the chat really quick how it is. When GTA 6 drops, me and Ricky are going to make the biggest server together. We're going to do the best shit ever, and I promise you it's going to be completely crypto, everything pro-crypto about it. I'll have the best and biggest server, I promise you I will, and we're going to put a lot of money into it. I promise all of you, I swear to this is my passion. We started SSB World.
Facts.
You found me from GTA. I'm making it very clear to everybody right now, you're going to get paid to play my game. I promise you.
Right.
I promise you are. Correct.
You realize that? Like, if you go and create a fucking restaurant or a brand, potentially, you're going to be able to convert that money, those winnings, into real-life gain.
Me and Ricky are going to start working on the GTA 6 server as soon as we possibly can. Who's not going to want to play my world when you can make money playing it? Even if I got to come out of my own pocket to pay people, I'm going to do it.
Wait, what's your thoughts on GTA 6?
They need to put me in that motherfucker.
I'm in it,
For real?
They put me in it. I can't speak on it. I signed a bunch of documents, but I'm in it.
Man, I feel left out, man.
Okay, so that's Adin Ross, of course, I think one of the culture icons right now when you think about what he's doing in gaming. Now, he's kind of edging the boundary here a little bit. I mean, because Rockstar could end up getting into a scenario where they block this or ban it. But will they, is my question. Back to your point, because you're hitting on some very key things. Brand IP starting to transition maybe into this next level. This was coming back from 2022, talking about RP servers. And when you look at that and the impact that someone like Adin Ross could bring to this, do you think they'll let this slide? What are your thoughts?
So first of all, we have to consider where the world is today, right? Take-Two is an American company.
Yeah.
Guess who's president of America at the moment in time? Guess what
Yep.
people are doing right now, right?
No doubt.
So one can argue that the last couple of years, and you may recall that, when NFTs really started to become super hot in 21, every gaming executive was talking about the potential of NFTs, right? They weren't actually sort of dissing it. It was both the combination of the backlash, what happened with FTX, Terra Luna, and of course, the political climate in the US that very much sort of created this sort of mass rejection of, let's not go there. The consumer obviously was being spooked. They didn't know what was going on, right? All of that's going to change, right?
Yeah,
the GTA 6
sure.
is due to be released in September, knock on wood, because, it's been delayed forever. So it might be a little bit delayed more, but who knows? The point is, it's closer towards the end of the year. And, a lot is going to change. And what we do know, if we were a betting man, and in this case, I think most of us are, in terms of making a direction, we would say crypto is just going to get better for the world over the next 9 months, not worse, right? So what that means is that you're going to have a more friendly climate. People are going to integrate stuff, right? You're not going to have a situation where, like Minecraft says, oh, we want to ban crypto, that kind of thing. I think they'll take a more laissez-faire approach, we believe. Now, even if they don't, it's going to create the kind of sort of negative backlash that I think they may have to reconsider, especially because there's potential political implications that come with it as well, right? So I think, if you wanted to be, and the other thing is, I would argue GTA is, of course, an edgy game. Let's just face, right? It's not a game that's supposed to be sort of, conformist. It doesn't follow. I mean, if you can run over a grandma inside a game, then you can certainly have a game that supports crypto. Like I would imagine,
yeah, for
right?
sure.
So and without actually, we're not here to endorse what is good or what is bad, and I think that's the whole point. And that's why people love GTA. The fact that people can basically just do whatever they want, right? And that this open world sort of live out your life and sort of in sort of pretty aggressive ways in some ways is actually what is part of the appeal of that game, and I would say thematically fits quite well, with this whole sort of freedom and liberty perspective. So I would believe that they'd be okay with it, but I don't think Take-Two is going to be sort of going and saying, hey, we embrace it. I don't think they need to, but if they let people do stuff with it and mash it up, that's actually sort of where that culture keeps sort of getting appropriated and actually becomes more powerful and bigger. And GTA 6, Take-Two hasn't sort of come up with an update, I think, for almost 7 or 8 years now. Okay? So there's a lot of pent-up demand, and I would argue that GTA 6 is perhaps the largest cultural sort of moment. It doesn't matter. I mean, it's going to be bigger than sort of, it's like the Star Wars or the Marvel Avengers of this year type of thing, right? That's kind of how we look at it, which means a few things. One, of course, Take-Two has filed a few interesting AI patents for gaming. So there's going to be a lot of interesting things that are happening there that one can review and take a look at, which will give sort of, I think, new sort of let's call it hope, but also sort of opportunity prospecting for what AI and gaming can really do, right? And we've seen a little stuff with PUBG Ally, but that's kind of more in a companion AI. Here, I think it's going to be much more on the NPC level, right? Just because the whole engagement in an open world of NPC is kind of what makes GTA so interesting in terms of navigating the world in 10,000 different ways. But the other one, of course, is that in gaming, I think it's going to trigger a general gaming bull run, not just across the industry, but also in Web3 in particular. And that's because our space is so narrative driven, right? So if you think about sort of, what was the big narrative really for our industry the last 6 months was AI. What was really big in the non-Web3 world? AI, right? And most people might not sort of notice if they're not in the gaming industry, but gaming has actually been largely stagnant post-COVID, right? So the overall revenues in gaming hasn't actually increased over the last few years, despite the projections, because so the user numbers haven't been growing. And also there's been a lack of new titles and a lack of new sort of hardware. So for instance, when you look at sort of what's the other big thing that's happening this year is Nintendo Switch 2. The Switch 2, they haven't, Nintendo hasn't released a sequel to the Switch in, I think, also 7 or 8 years.
It's
right?
crazy,
it's a long time coming, right?
Exactly.
Right? But they sold 1.3 billion units. 1.3 billion games were sold, through the Switch, and close to, I think, it's 146 to 147 million console units have been sold. Which really, when you think about it, in terms of the number of people that played it, is basically, probably like close to a billion, if not more, right? So these two triggers are all happening this year, right? So we think this could potentially be the big year, because
This is
what
the
happens
event.
when you buy a new console? Yeah,
Yep.
when you buy a new console, you have to buy new games, right?
Yep.
Yeah, your old games work, but you want to buy the games that take advantage of the new the new content and the new hardware, for instance, right? And GTA 6 will do the same, broadly speaking. So I think these two events are really going to sort of push gaming into new heights, which I think will affect sort of all projects, including in Web3, in terms of very positively.
Well, and the thing you have to remember is Adin Ross, this was the key influencer that helped Donald Trump get elected when you think about TikTok and the really impact of what his culture and the connection to the generation that he kind of fosters around connected to Donald Trump. So I think there's a very interesting match made in heaven here with a pro-crypto president. Influencers are very clearly attached to this president, and the companies that most likely could gain from the benefits of all this working together. So I would agree with you. I think you're dead on with it. I want to move over to virtuals for a second. I'm looking at the virtuals market cap. Obviously, this may be one of the best bargains out there right now. Market cap under $1 billion, about 962 million. You look at some of their movement in the overall agent protocol and where the revenue has been going recently, now moving more into agent revenue. Do you think that hurts them as a platform, or what are your thoughts on that?
Why would you say it hurts them? Because I think it's
in
just
the sense of revenue.
No?
Well, yeah, it does diversify, yeah, of course. But agent revenue versus protocol revenue daily. So you can kind of see when this happened at the end of last year, now it's mostly agent revenue that's being driven here. Now, granted, that would be a little less to the protocol. So is that a good thing or a bad thing for virtuals?
I actually think it's a good thing, because I think so. If you think about let's take a look at sort of what's actually the stuff that's going to ultimately drive the utility for virtuals. It's not it comes from the agents, right?
Right.
So the more agents that are out there, and the more powerful they become, and the more utility is applied to them, then ultimately that will also have the fly effect into the sort of the protocol revenue. Now, there's always a very interesting tug of war between what's great for a business and what's great for an economy, right? And this is kind of the way to distinguish between how you think about something like an L1, L2, or in this case, a platform, let's call it the protocol, versus the product itself. So, for instance, it's great that Uniswap makes a lot of money on trading on Ethereum, right? And obviously, it makes more fees, and that's great. However, if the gas fees of Ethereum become too high, which it could, like if it was higher, it would be great in terms of, stakers, because they basically make more fees. But would that be better or worse for both Ethereum as well as Uniswap? And I think the general answer would be that it's actually worse, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, in order to sort of fuel the ecosystem and grow that and build stronger network effects, you have to have that fine balance of course, the sustainable revenue. But also you can't overtax, because that's exactly the point, right? When you start to overtax and charge way too much, then actually it does quite the opposite. And revenues decline, utility declines, and all that kind of stuff happening as well. So I would argue that more agentic growth over time is better. And it's not that different. It's not that different from when countries and economies start to subsidize activity using taxpayers' money, for instance, as a way to sort of spur on an economy. But then they essentially create more business, and then they hire more people. And what's going to onboard more people into the protocol? Clearly, it's going to be the agents, not the protocol in and of itself.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and they're even kind of touting this of course being one of the team leads over there at Virtuals. Teams launching agents on Solana, please wait for us, don't do it anywhere else. So they're trying to navigate that transition as they move on to Solana with all of that. So I would agree with you. I think there's a huge opportunity here for these to kind of move forward. Why do you think we have not seen agents really start to activate within Sandbox? What do you think has been the holdback there?
So I think the main reason for Sandbox is the fact that it's still an alpha season. So hopefully we can expect some activity there. Actually pretty soon, I would say. So, but right now you already have AI implementations, in some of the tools that Sandbox has.
I want to play this clip because this is Sebastian talking about virtuals a little bit. So it might help some of you that are kind of looking at this. Let's go to that clip.
So we've seen experiment with Minecraft where like hundreds of agents are like competing with each other for collecting and crafting resource. We're looking at what can be done on Sandbox as well. Right now, like this virtues like this AI agent protocol that allows you to launch bots and agents for Twitter, for YouTube, and so on. The format from this type of interaction needs to be simplified.
So Sebastian Bourguet, CEO over there at Sandbox. So we've, for I think most, that's the good thing is that Sebastian seems to always be tied into where this is going. So I would agree that it's coming soon. So we'll see how this plays out. I want to jump over to airdrops, and you look at what's happening right now. Sui is, of course, doing their Sui Play potential airdrop. You also have the potential where the Seeker is going to get launched. We're probably going to see some more airdrops there. You look at that, and do you feel like this aligns with what's happening with the AI agents and all of the AI narrative as a whole, with these two new devices possibly hitting the market?
So I don't think it's just specifically to these new devices. Right now, when it comes to devices, we're still at the early innings. And also you have to think about the utility of the items, of these hardware, because most of them are using the hardware really as a marketing acquisition type of tool, rather than, and then hopefully converting that. I mean, it's the same mechanism that airdrops do for Web3 games or protocols. You entice people to basically use a product, and then, a significant number will stay and build the network from there, and then, network effects proliferate. The utility of the phone wasn't really better than your Samsung, for instance, right? And so the distinguishing aspects weren't there outside of, I can get some airdrops. And how many people ended up buying the phone because of the airdrop versus because they wanted to use the phone, right? Now but again, it's the marketing side to bring attention to it. And then how do you build the network from it? And so, for instance, what you see in things like sort of Google and with Apple, really that network effect was built with things like the App Store or Google Play, right? And that actually created essentially an ecosystem around that. So building that ecosystem framework around that is really important. And at its early days, we do expect a lot of specific hardware to come out in the area, but I would say we haven't yet found the one that is super Web3 native in the traditional sense, in the way that you would think of something that you could only do that in Web3 just yet. But, we're looking forward to that.
Well, I think the Seeker could end up being something similar to that. We'll see how what it looks like when it launches. But to reflect, remember that when you look at Solana and the Saga, I think were the initial catalyst for the bull run to launch. You had Bonk do the airdrop. It essentially, I think, saved the Saga phone itself, and possibly put a relationship between hardware and airdrops and marketing and loyalty into the landscape for almost every major brand out there. So it's going to be very intriguing to watch. I want to leap over to AR and DPIN, because this could be another hype cycle that's getting ready to roll out. And one of the things that we've talked about here on the channel is the partnership with, of course, Over and Nadix, which is getting into spatial computing. The Internet of Cameras, I guess, now is the theme. But I want to play a clip for you and get your opinion on this. Take a look.
I'm talking with a lot of these guys, and the common denominator is two problems: compute and real world data. For compute, they have NVIDIA, they all say it actually, they have NVIDIA on the cap table on all of them. That's how they're trying to address compute. For real world data, they're still struggling. And this is where I think DPIN is the solution.
All right, so what do you think, Yat Siu? Is DPIN the solution, especially when you look at this kind of integration coming?
Well, so first of all, Animoca is very bullish on DPIN broadly. We've done probably, I don't know, is it maybe 20, 25 investments in DPIN now, over the course of our sort of portfolio. Most of it has been in the area of compute, right? And also access and also geolocation type of stuff, right? So I do think it makes, one of the interesting things about DPIN though, which is very different from a lot of the, let's call it, I guess, other Web3 narratives, is it actually generates revenue very quickly. Right. So it's a much more sort of, let's call it sort of traditional model, because it's less about the branding space as much. than it is about sort of the fact that there's a utility attached to it, right? So very bullish on this one. To me, I personally feel like, owning pieces in a network ensures essentially, especially the more decentralized it becomes, ensures that the independence of that network, right? How do you ensure that AI compute isn't controlled by just a few big companies? Because even if the model is decentralized, if the compute is owned by one giant company or a few of them, then you're kind of dead in the water in terms of the whole decentralization thesis.
Yeah.
Right. But of course, because of technology, lower cost operation, being able to run this in your own home, or run it in a decentralized manner in some form or fashion where you get benefits and value from this, you're now a stakeholder. And if you're a stakeholder, you don't want to give that up. So very bullish on this. It's a very important part of our decentralization thesis in terms of the future of the web. Obviously most of it in the areas of compute, file storage, but of course extends beyond that. And of course, the mashup of these things as well. And also, in the future, in some ways, just, when you think of Minecraft servers, when you think of gaming servers, they're actually kind of early versions of DeepIn without being called DeepIn. If you will.
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to leap over to education for a second. I know you guys are active in it. I know you're passionate about this, but Trump is getting ready to set an executive order to potentially shut down the education department. So this could happen, and the likelihood of AI being a big role in the future could be real. I was looking at this tweet right here. Obviously you see it, but hockey stick mode on. The amount of potential AI integration into education. Could this timing be perfect for possibly the proliferation of AI-injected education in the future, which could change education as a whole? What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. So if you take a look at, you just shared sort of the gelato comment in terms of the growth of EDU chain, growing to $150 million TVL, incredible number of transactions. So let's just do some macro on education, right? Education is about a $5+ trillion space today. And it's one of those unhyped spaces because it's somewhat unsexy, but it drives a ton of revenue. And the reason why is because that's what we all have to do in order to advance in life, right? AI agents can sort of create more tutoring. So when you look at some of the new products that TinyTap has created, and again, because they're using blockchain, there's actually areas, how do you pay the teacher? How do you pay the content creator? How do you share value? That's really exciting. But then also, what Open Campus EDU, one of their sort of incubated projects, from the accelerator, is now looking to solve student loans with DeFi. And again, that's a really interesting paradigm here. It's not just about sort of education in itself. It's also how do you onboard people into crypto. And if you get a student and he gets some of his student loans financed through crypto, he's onboarded for life in perhaps the most meaningful manner as well. And also when you think about sort of talking to skeptical people and skeptical politicians around the world, what is crypto good for? And they'll point to meme coins and point to gaming and point to DeFi. But actually, when you talk about education, nobody can argue that that's a bad thing, right? Yeah. So that's very positive. Now, in terms of Trump saying, and how this affects education. So first, education nationally still is, of course, an ideological thing as well, because what you teach the next generation or your children is very much how you think about sort of your value system as well, right? The whole sort of nurture side of things. So there's definitely a political agenda attached. So we have to bear that in mind. Yeah. That said, right? In a government that is looking to have a generally less government interventionist perspective, which is what this administration is definitely sort of on side for, basically less government, you do your own thing. It does mean that a lot of that will become more outsourced, essentially towards private institutions and individuals themselves. Yeah. So they will need tools to do that, right? Outside of let me go to this school, let me go to that school. And so AI is very critical. And of course, blockchain is very critical as well in terms of how do you deal with rights and how do you deal with accreditation and how do you deal with this stuff in a truly decentralized manner, bringing in the millions of teachers as well in the space that actually are not really if you think about it, don't really have a good mechanism outside of the institution of the sort of government education system. So now, what kind of private setup can you actually coalesce people into the system where they can actually make a living and create value on chain? And that's actually, what we believe EDU chain will be. It's the only one that's doing it, which is the other crazy thing. But then, when we started doing gaming in 2018 and 2019, we were almost the only ones doing gaming as well back then until it became mainstream. in terms of Web3, and we think education will be just the same. So we're very bullish on this one.
I know you're running short on time, so I just wanted to get your last statement on this, and that is Web 2.5. So Web 2.5 quit, of course, out of the game, off the sideline now, and in the locker room. So what do you think this means for Web 2.5? Is this kind of the last stand, or
Yeah.
what do you
So
think?
yeah. So first, let me comment on Quid. So Quid is actually transitioning. So that means that the assets and so on are actually going on to a partnership that we have. I think that messaging can end up becoming somewhat premature in the sense that people were like, oh, what's happening? But the reality is that the assets are moving on. They're continuing to be around. Quid will just have a new version of itself. It probably won't be called Quid in itself in a collectible fashion. Now, because there are people who have collected, who have spent money in this, and obviously we want to respect that in the spirit of digital property rights. So that's kind of just one point to clarify. But the second point, in terms of Web 2.5, I guess generally, you may have heard me say on the show a couple of times that I'm somewhat of a critic of Web 2.5, not because Web 2.5 as its idea isn't sort of relevant. I think it's important. It's the fact that, which side of the Web 2.5 are you on, and how do you help onboard people? And the thesis was that, you want to make a blockchain sort of, somewhat invisible, and sort of somewhat, and you, in the back end, you end up basically sort of using it, but you don't really use it. Kind of like the whole sort of, you don't need to know it's called MP3 when you're listening to digital music type of thing, right? However, what we found, in Web3 is that actually you need to have enough knowledge so that you can partake in the general network effects of Web3. So meaning that, the power of a Web3 game, for instance, isn't the fact that you can trade your items inside the game. You don't need Web3 for that. It's the fact that you have DeFi that has billions of dollars of liquidity. It's the fact that you could trade it, not inside your own game, those assets, but outside of your game as well, right? So there's an entire ecosystem. And I would say the criticism in Web 2.5 that I have, generally speaking, which is sort of really a 21-22 narrative, has been mostly around building ultimately a walled garden that has crypto rails, right, using blockchain technology, but wasn't actually truly interoperable. And now when you think about things like layer 0, and when you think about sort of new implementations out there in terms of cross-bridging interoperability, actually that's, for instance, we were, as we're also in Pudgy Penguins, and this was a perfect example of how you address both an Ethereum and a Solana community. And you can do that and create a kind of interoperability between that, right? And in the traditional Web 2.5 sort of structure, that's not contemplated because the Web3 experience isn't front and center.
Exactly.
What's actually front and center is the Web 2 experience, right? And I think, we ourselves also had to go through sort of this experience and lesson as well. Back in 2018, 2019, if you look at many of our games, they were actually also kind of Web 2.5-ish, right? And then we've transitioned a lot into games that are really sort of much more native in Web3. And of course, things that you see with Ton and Telegram as well, the whole airdrop mechanism, that's actually quite Web3 native, right? It's not it's not hidden at all. You need to have a wallet and you need to build TVL, or you need to put in liquidity, all that kind of stuff.
Man, I tell you, I think this is, we are in for a very interesting 2025 and on, as especially the evolution of where blockchain is going. So, Yat Siu, always a joy having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming in today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. All right, you guys, if you are not in the Diamond Circle, get in now. It's our own private group. We also have a Telegram group that you can join. Just click the link down below. It's going to get you in there. I actually go into that Telegram group daily, communicate with a lot of our audience. So I love to kind of hear what you guys are doing. That's the way you talk to me. And of course, if you want to reach me out there on X, it's @Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.